Only 60 Syrian rebels have been trained by the U.S. to fight ISIS. 60 out of an original goal of up to 5,000 per year. I'm joined now by Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. He served in the Air Force in both Iraq and Afghanistan. It's good to have you on the show. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks.
So you heard from the Defense Secretary today saying only 60 Syrian fighters trained so far. The original goal was 5,400 in the year, then reduced to 3,000 by the end of this year. Is this program anything else but a failure, in your view?
I mean, it seems like that so far. We voted on this, I guess it seems like a year ago. It was probably about 8 or 9 months ago. It was controversial out here in Capitol Hill. We passed this idea of training the moderate Syrian rebels, which there are moderate Syrian rebels in Syria that both want to destroy Bashar al-Assad, who's an evil, brutal dictator, and also want to destroy ISIS because that doesn't represent the country that they want to live in. To hear that it's 60, I'll be honest with you, I had to read that a number of times. It blew me away. That's basically a couple of platoons of men, and that's not going to be, without saying, that's not going to be enough to destroy ISIS or even probably hold a small village of 100 from ISIS.
1% of the original annual goal. But one of the issues you raised there, and this is what we hear from the Defense Department, is that a lot of the recruits, they don't want to fight ISIS, they want to fight Assad. So they've got a fundamental difference of the ultimate goal of who they're fighting and who the enemy is.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some truth to that. I think, when it comes to having a moderate opposition, the key is going to be holding territory. In some cases, that may be holding territory from Assad forces or holding territory from ISIS forces. The purpose is to take back the country of Syria. And, look, you can't say that these folks that were raised, let's say you're 30 years old. Your dad may have been killed by Bashar al-Assad. Your family has been brutalized by him. No Western power is going to come in and say, yeah, but you can't fight him. The only people you can fight are the people that we are an enemy with. Look, they hate ISIS. Trust me, they don't like ISIS. But they also don't like Bashar al-Assad, who is the incubator of this problem in the first place.
Let me ask you this, though, because the president reiterates that it has to be local ground forces in Iraq, the Kurds, Syrian rebels who take and hold territory. Frankly, that's not working. We don't see that in Iraq. The maps look largely the same. There's been some progress in the northern part of Syria by local Kurds there. But in your view, since the local forces, since the train and equip is not delivering results, do you believe you have to put more U.S. troops on the ground to lead the way?
Well, I don't think we need U.S. troops to occupy territory. What I have said, and this is part of what I did in Iraq, what I was involved with, was special forces raids, like what we saw in Syria that we celebrated. It was a big victory for us. Special forces that can go in and take out key figures, get their info, go out and take 10 that, that guy led to, and then 10 that they led to. So being involved in that decapitation process of ISIS in Syria is important. But when it comes to holding ground, even Arab forces can't hold all the ground in Syria. You think about Jordan, for instance. Jordan is the size of Illinois without the city of Chicago, 6 million people. So the idea that Jordan move their troops in, for instance, and occupy Syria is it's not realistic. So you have to have a moderate rebel force, and 60 of them just ain't going to cut it.
The new buzzword from the administration on this fight seems to be patience, strategic patience. It's going to take time. But we heard General Dempsey today, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, conceding, in his words, that being patient on ISIS could actually increase the risk from ISIS on the U.S. homeland. Well, what is your reaction to that? That's a remarkable concession to a group that the president acknowledged is a direct threat to the U.S.
Well, look, it's absolutely true. I mean, the president has got to lay out and say, look, we have to destroy this group. So not only, in the medium term, they're planning attacks probably against local governments, as we've seen, probably against some American assets in that area. But in the long term, they definitely want to strike the American homeland. We know Al-Qaeda does, and there's an affiliation there. Look, at the end of the day, this is something that's going to have to be destroyed. It's going to have to be dealt with, because every day that goes by that ISIS occupies territory, they're recruiting from that territory, they're killing people, which we see all too tragically, and they're digging in. They're putting their IEDs out, they're putting their roadside bombs, and they're developing a form of governance. Now, obviously, when we think of government, we think of water towers and roads. ISIS thinks of brutal Sharia law. It's like how the Taliban ran Afghanistan. They weren't building schools, they weren't building water towers, but they stayed in until an outside force came in and kicked them out.
Congressman Kinzinger, an Iraq and Afghan war vet, former pilot, thanks very much for joining us from the Hill.
Thanks, Jim. You bet.
Coming up, new